Yes, the cables installed in PVC conduit underground must meet the requirements of 300.5 D5 and be listed for a wet location. Although Chapter 8 does not specifically reference 300.5, it does require that cables installed in underground raceways be listed for use in wet locations per 800.57a. 300.5 D5 provides the specific requirements for cables installed in wet locations, including the requirement that they be listed for such use. Therefore, meeting the requirements of 300.5 D5 would also ensure compliance with 800.57a. By following these requirements, you can help ensure the safety and reliability of the electrical system in a wet location. Let's delve into why these codes are essential and what they mean for your installation. Firstly, understanding the terminology is key. A wet location is defined by the National Electrical Code, or NEC, refers to areas subject to saturation with water or other liquids. This could be due to weather, equipment washing, or other processes. Underground conduits, by their very nature, are often considered wet locations due to condensation, water infiltration, and the potential for ground moisture. Secondly, let's discuss the importance of using listed cables. When a cable is listed, it means that it has been tested and certified by a recognized testing laboratory such as Underwriters Laboratories or all to meet specific safety standards. These standards ensure that the cable is suitable for its intended use and can withstand the environmental conditions it will be exposed to. For wet locations, cables must be listed for wet locations, meaning they are designed with materials and construction methods that prevent water from entering the cable and causing damage or electrical hazards. Now let's break down NEC section 300.5 D5. This section specifically addresses the installation of cables and raceways underground. It mandates that direct buried cables and raceways must be suitable for the environment they are installed in, which includes being listed for wet locations if the conduit is subject to moisture. This provision exists to protect the cable from degradation due to moisture, which can lead to insulation breakdown, corrosion of conductors, and ultimately, electrical failures or safety hazards. The requirement for cables to be listed for wet locations and underground conduits is further reinforced by NEC section 800.57a, which applies to communication cables. While Chapter 8 of the NEC focuses on communication systems, this section explicitly requires that cables installed in underground raceways must be listed for use in wet locations. This is because the same risks associated with moisture damage apply to communication cables as to power cables. It's important to note that even if the conduit itself is watertight, the NEC still requires the cables within it to be listed for wet locations. This is because condensation can form inside the conduit, especially in environments with temperature fluctuations. Furthermore, it's difficult to guarantee that a conduit system will remain perfectly watertight over its entire lifespan. Therefore, the cable itself must be capable of withstanding wet conditions. Choosing the right cable for an underground, wet location application involves several considerations. Firstly, identify cables specifically listed for wet locations. These cables are typically marked with designations such as wet location or suitable for wet locations on their outer jacket. Secondly, consider the type of insulation used in the cable. Common insulation materials for wet locations include polyethylene, cross-linked polyethylene, and polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. These materials are resistant to moisture and provide good electrical insulation properties. Thirdly, ensure that the cable is sized appropriately for the intended load and voltage drop requirements. Use appropriate ampacity tables and voltage drop calculations to determine the correct cable size. Fourthly, install the cable according to the manufacturer's instructions and all applicable NEC requirements. This includes proper burial depth, support, and protection from physical damage. Common types of cables suitable for wet locations and underground installations include underground feeder or OFF cable, which is a non-metallic sheet cable specifically designed for direct burial applications. It has a moisture-resistant outer jacket and is suitable for use in wet locations. Another is underground service entrance, or use cable, which is similar to UF cable but is typically used for service entrance applications. It is also suitable for direct burial and wet locations. Another example is individual conductors in conduit. When using individual conductors in conduit, ensure that the conductors are listed for wet locations. Types THWN and XHHW are commonly used for this purpose. These conductors have moisture-resistant insulation and are suitable for use in wet locations. Now, let's address some common misconceptions. One misconception is that if the conduit is buried deep enough, the cables don't need to be listed for wet locations. This is not true. The NEC requires cables to be listed for wet locations regardless of the burial depth. Another misconception is that if the conduit is sealed at both ends, the cables don't need to be listed for wet locations. Again, this is incorrect. Condensation can still form inside the sealed conduit, creating a wet environment. A further misconception is that low voltage cables don't need to be listed for wet locations. This is also false. The NEC requirements apply to all cables regardless of voltage level. Failing to comply with the NEC requirements for wet location cable installations can have serious consequences. Firstly, it can lead to electrical failures, such as short circuits, ground faults, and open circuits. These failures can disrupt power supply and damage equipment. Secondly, it can create safety hazards, such as electric shock and fire. Moisture can compromise the insulation of the cable, making it easier for electricity to leak and cause shocks or ignite flammable materials. Thirdly, it can result in code violations and fines. Electrical inspectors are responsible for enforcing the NEC, and they can issue citations and penalties for non-compliance. Fourthly, it can void warranties and insurance coverage. If an electrical failure or safety hazard occurs due to non-compliant cable installation, the manufacturer's warranty may be voided and insurance companies may deny coverage. To ensure compliance with the NEC, follow these best practices. Firstly, always use cables listed for wet locations in underground conduit installations. Secondly, consult the NEC and local electrical codes for specific requirements. Thirdly, follow the manufacturer's instructions for cable installation. Fourthly, hire a qualified electrician to perform the installation. Fifthly, inspect the installation regularly to ensure that it is in good condition. In addition to the NEC requirements, there may be local electrical codes that apply to wet location cable installations. These codes may be more stringent than the NEC requirements, so it's important to check with the local authorities to ensure compliance. Furthermore, it's crucial to maintain accurate documentation of the cable installation. This documentation should include the type of cable used, the manufacturer's name, the listing information, the installation date, and any inspection reports. This documentation can be helpful in the event of an electrical failure or safety hazard. When replacing cables in existing underground conduit systems, it's important to carefully inspect the conduit for damage or deterioration. If the conduit is damaged, it should be repaired or replaced before installing the new cables. It's also important to ensure that the new cables are compatible with the existing conduit system. This includes verifying the conduit size and full capacity. Proper grounding is essential for electrical safety in wet locations. Ensure that the grounding system is properly installed and maintained according to the NEC requirements. This includes grounding the conduit, equipment, and any metallic enclosures. Surge protection devices can help protect electrical equipment from damage caused by voltage surges, such as those from lightning strikes. Consider installing surge protection devices on circuits that supply power to sensitive equipment in wet locations. Regular inspections are crucial for identifying potential problems before they lead to failures or safety hazards. Inspect cables, conduits, and connections for signs of damage, corrosion, or moisture. Test the grounding system to ensure that it is functioning properly. Consider using cable management systems to organize and protect cables in underground conduit installations. These systems can help prevent cables from becoming tangled or damaged. They can also make it easier to identify and troubleshoot problems. Proper cable labeling is essential for identifying cables in underground conduit installations. Label each cable with its circuit number, voltage, and function. This will help prevent confusion and make it easier to perform maintenance or repairs. Consider using cable pulling lubricants to reduce friction when pulling cables through conduits. These lubricants can make it easier to install cables and prevent damage to the cable insulation. When working with electrical systems in wet locations, it's important to take extra precautions to prevent electric shock. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as rubber gloves and insulated tools. Ensure that the power is turned off before working on any electrical equipment. Follow lockout/tagout procedures to prevent accidental energization of the circuit. If you are not qualified to perform electrical work, hire a licensed electrician. Working with electricity can be dangerous, and it's important to have the knowledge and skills to do it safely. In conclusion, installing cables and underground PVC conduit in wet locations requires careful attention to the NEC requirements and best practices. By using cables listed for wet locations, following proper installation procedures, and maintaining the system regularly, you can help ensure the safety and reliability of the electrical system. Remember to always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local electrical codes for the most up-to-date requirements. If you have any questions or concerns, consult with a qualified electrician. Staying informed and taking the necessary precautions will help you create a safe and compliant electrical installation. The information provided here is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer for specific applications. Safety should always be the top priority when working with electrical systems. Take the time to learn the relevant codes and best practices, and never hesitate to ask for help if you are unsure about something. By working together, we can create safer and more reliable electrical systems for everyone.